I switched to Dr. Pepper because
Dude,
I just run out of Monster so fast.
Dr. Pepper is the best.
I feel like a 14-year-old kid getting ready for like a video game sleepover night. All right, welcome back, everybody. We are Rough Draft Research. You are the audience, and together we are on a quest for Dynasty domination. And we're back like we always are, weekly in and out. How you doing over there, Dan?
Oh man, I'm doing great. Just swimming in the basking joy of the memories of the Dr. Pepper's future, past, and present.
It's a good
So
one. It's a staple. Not like I don't know that it's quite on the Mount Rushmore of sodas.
what?
But well, I mean that's maybe a conversation for another podcast.
Okay,
But I mean, what you got to go Coke,
sure.
Pepsi,
Absolutely.
okay? And then
Well, yeah.
I mean they're kind of the same, but that those are the two really big competitors. And
Your
then
Sprite
then Mountain Dew, right?
fuck. Yeah,
And
that's
then
true.
Sprite, like that's
Yeah,
kind of what I was
yeah.
thinking. Those four, or even and then there's like a second tier where I think Dr. Pepper, like Orange Fanta,
Oh
stuff like
yeah.
that kind of hangs out where they're like almost like if there was a Mount Rushmore B, that's where those guys would hang out. You know
I
what I
don't know what
mean?
it's like. Yeah, the squirt make it on there, like the nostalgia
See, I've
soda.
never had Squirt,
Oh
so I
geez.
think that just missed me.
Yeah. Well, it's legit.
All right,
You're
so
right.
welcome back to Rough Soda Research, and we are
We're
talking
shaking
about
it up over here, like always.
shaking it up with the Mentos, talking about our Mount Rushmore soda. No, actually, we're a fantasy podcast, and we are talking about roster construction. So you know we're in the off season. That's when we're going to talk about roster construction. But we're gonna kind of just break down how we go about fixing up our rosters essentially. I'm gonna let Dan kind of take a little more in depth of what we're doing today, and then we'll go from there. So
Yeah.
Dan, kind of go with it.
All
I
right.
guess I didn't need that second part, but
I'm flowing, man. Like a freshly opened bottle of soda. I'm gonna pour this one out for you guys. Yeah, so it's the off season, and that's the time where you want to realign your roster with your goals. And we all know you can't have it all. So you got to get serious about your strengths and your weaknesses, what you're willing to accept as weaknesses, and kind of what kind of moves you want to make to cover your bases and have a little insurance while also investing in some future upsides. So I think I want to really focus tonight on like bench construction, like
okay.
types of bench players, just like categories really. And the reason for that is, starters are held on to, right, pretty
Mm-hmm.
heavily. Like you're kind of locked in with your starters, but your bench players are players that are acquirable, especially
Mm-hmm.
in the off season when people are wanting to make moves, getting the fantasy itch, got to pass the time. And you're also hitting your waivers and doing your deep dives, and players are changing teams, all kinds of stuff. So before we get into like kind of categorizing what the bench is looking like and what type of players we're chasing, I think it's important that we go through like how our rosters are built, like our approach to building rosters. That way
Mhm.
you have a frame of reference for kind of how we're backfilling our standbys. So, I mean, with that in mind, we always focus on for the belt, just because it's our oldest dynasty league. I think a lot of our listeners are familiar with the league
Mhm.
for the most part. So that's the one we're gonna really hone in on because we could talk all day about the millions of dynasty leagues we're in.
Yeah,
Um,
that's for sure.
but
Too many, arguably.
I mean, yeah, I only added one this year, only added one last year, so I feel like there's a trend. So hopefully I can just cap it. But how about you, man? I'd like to hear you describe to me your kind of like your roster construction as a footnote to how the bench goes. So we'll just each talk about our rosters and our approach, and then we'll get into the categories.
Yeah, for sure. So this was an interesting little exercise for me because my roster is different than it typically looks. I'm in a bit of a turnover period where I'm doing a lot on my roster. I sold my soul to lose by scoring less than 80 points in the playoffs last season. So I got to retool. Typically, like we're a one QB league, so I like to go I want to have like one superstar quarterback. If not, if I can't get a superstar, then I'm fine having two guys that I rotate. But in terms of dynasty league, I always want to have at least one guy on the bench that is young, who I'm like eyeing for potential future use. So basically the two guys that I can actively use, and then one guy that's kind of just sitting, uh, me kind of waiting it out. For a long time, it was I had Josh Rosen, and then I'm rocking Desmond Ritter currently. Just a few like random guys that I just wanted to hold on to just to see, and then I've had Aaron Rodgers as my guy kind of going forward. Did you want to flip by position, or did you just want to kind of me
We
roll?
might as well. I can easily jump in right there.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
as far as quarterback, I'm kind of I think I'm partway with you. Historically, I kind of go YOLO, which I don't know if the kids are still saying that,
Hmm.
but I go YOLO on my quarterback. Like I want a proven high-end starter on my roster, and I don't really invest much in the backup. Like I'm willing to kind of punt the bye week almost. And
Hmm.
historically, if I've had a backup quarterback of any kind of value, I've traded him.
Hmm.
I traded Jameis Winston at a point, Matthew Stafford, Desmond Ritter, like just guys that I didn't think really were going to get any starts, and I felt comfortable not having a backup. So I've got Burrow, and I'm just riding him. Sure, I just drafted CJ Stroud, but it was a value pick at the back end of the second,
Hmm.
so I feel like I'm covered there. But I do not go after. I do not spend on a backup quarterback for some reason. I just don't.
Mine will depend on how I feel about the backup quarterback. Like I spent a first round pick in the rookie draft this year on Anthony Richardson,
Sure.
but I'm fairly high on him. But it's the youth that I'll spend on, like the young. I'm not going to spend a lot on like a backup quarterback, like an aging backup quarterback, just to be behind my starter. Like I backup quarterbacks I've rolled with were like Ben Roethlisberger for a bit, Jared Goff there for a little bit, like just guys along that era, and it's worked fine for me. So quarterback I don't typically, but in a super flex I definitely want to at least have like four starters if you can manage it, if not
Yeah.
three.
Yeah.
But in this league I'm really worried about one. We'll get into like how my bench looks later and kind of why it's a bit wonky than what I normally want. But on that note, let's get into the running back section. So here, this is where, and it's gonna sound like, oh yeah, duh, obvious. Of course you would. But typically, I want to at least roster four starting running backs, and I don't mean like
Ooh.
fantasy. oh, they're RB1s or RB2s. I mean, literally, quite literally, I want 4 running backs on my roster that start for their team. And that sounds really easy, but in a 12-team dynasty league with 16 bench spots, there are 32 starting running backs, and there's 12 teams in our league. So that's an average of 3 per team in terms of starters. So I think it's really, really important. And it's one of the reasons I traded away Cooper Kupp this offseason was because I couldn't get another running back that was a starter. I was running out Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb. Those are my only 2 running backs that were starters on my roster. So I did a package trade involving Pacheco to get a third. And I'm still down one. I'm still down a 4th starting running back. But so after that, after the 4 starters, and obviously you want like 1 superstar to build around or 2 like top 10 to 15 guys that you can roll out every single week. That's kind of what I've, instead of having 1 superstar like I've had in the past, at certain points I've had Alvin Kamara or Delvin Cook or CMC randomly in this league, but I've always had behind whoever that was Aaron Jones and Nick Chubb. And these last 2 seasons, I've basically just been using their combined top 10 RB status to roll out an RB1 each week. A pure RB1 each week. Now, sometimes they let me down. It is what it is. Getting into the bench, I'm really just, again, it sounds stupid and cliche, but I'm really just trying to go after guys that have starting potential in terms of either injuries to the guy in front of them or weak job status in terms of the guy in front of them, like somebody I don't think has that secure of a route. So since we're going to get into the bench a little later, I'll leave it at that and let you kind of talk about your RB strategy there. I am bleeding, by the way. Don't scratch scabs, kids. Jesus.
One of those 23 ingredients, flavors must be blood thinner. Be careful with that, Dr. Pepper, dude. Will not coagulate. So for me, running back's a fun position because I went 0 RB in our startup draft for this league. And so I've had to make some adjustments and now I have an interesting roster. You mentioned it's like 21 person roster, and I only have 6 running backs on my roster. And because of the 0 RB, I don't have the well like you had and have and the assets you can turn over and get the value out of. So I've had to really go top heavy with like, high end talent out of rookie drafts and trading future first and stuff like that to build a stable core of running backs. But because of that, I just don't have the depth and I don't have, I pay assets away to get the high end running backs. So I don't have the assets to get the handcuffs and the upside potential type of guys. So that's kind of my my approach is like shallow but stout as far as my RB room. And I guess to name names, I got Jonathan Taylor with my own pick from a bad year and a lucky 101 of Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Yeah, boy. And then last year, I circled the wagons pretty hard, was able to trade up and get Breece Hall.
You were.
And, I also traded future first for Ramondre before he blew up and worked Khalil Herbert into a package trade too. So, and I traded away Alvin Kamara to retain whatever value he had at the time. So that's basically where I'm at. The rest of the guys are not to be proud of and will be talked about as we get into like bench categories for sure. So yeah, man. Hit me with the wide receiver noise.
Yeah, and so here is where I want 2 true blood like superstars. Like this is where I really, really want to pound the table. I think in earlier years of my fantasy hood or fantasy, what I don't know what the word what was that?
Journey.
That's a good one. I may have slept on wide receivers. Oh, they're a dime a dozen. You can find whatever. I do still. in certain aspects, I think that, but it's more for the bench. Like I think there's tons of guys you can find to kind of roll out on a weekly basis when you need them, that can do work for you. But I do think you need two solid guys. Now, I don't have that right now on my roster. Again, I traded Cooper Cup and Terry McLaurin, who you could consider both those guys to be kind of in that space. Just trying to retool my roster. I'm not sure how it's going so far, but we'll see. But that's typically where I was at. I mean, before this offseason, I was rolling out Cooper Cup, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Garrett Wilson, Jerry Jeudy. Those were my guys. So that's a solid two superstars in there, if not two wide receiver twos right behind him. So that's the other thing, is that my wide receiver, like three, I want to be a minimum wide receiver two. So I want two superstars and then a two as my like third wide receiver. So in this case, I've got Garrett Wilson. I'm pretty much just banking on him being a wide receiver one, balling out with Aaron Rodgers. And then for the 2 and 3 spot, this is where I'm weak, because I have two guys that could conceivably fit into that third spot. I think Deontay Johnson has a chance to be a wide receiver one again, depending on the improvement on the Steelers offense. And then Jerry Jeudy is kind of in the same boat. If he bounces back with Sean Payton and Russell Wilson, then you never know. He could be a wide receiver one, but I'm banking on that happening. And that's not normally something I do. This is me like taking a risk and going for it. So I don't really have that superstar number two. I'm hoping that one of those guys reaches that point, but that's kind of like how I normally like to build my roster, at least in the wide receiver room.
Gotcha. I like that. I'm gonna put Jerry Jeudy here. I'll talk about him later, I believe. So yeah, I like your approach. That's essentially kind of what I've been trying to do in the running back room. And because I've talked about my kind of like high end must have top caliber but shallow depth for quarterback and running back, you can understand how my roster would end up being 50% occupied by wide receivers, because you can't have top end talent at every position. And so that's where I'm at for the wide receiver. A lot of my roster is allocated to that position. And I've got no one but myself to blame, man. I've had some really good luck finding like some gold nuggets at the receiver position, and it's lulled me into this often disappointing trust in myself. And I haven't been able to repeat as much. So I kind of have the spray and pray method going on in the wide receiver room, and it takes a lot of bodies to get to that point. So yeah, so I've got a depth of like guys that I'm just waiting to pop, and could be roster clogs. A lot of them we'll talk about when we get to the styles of bench players, because I think most all of them qualify as bench players, except for I've got Mike Evans and Chris Olave and Tyler Lockett, probably my flex. All players I acquired through trading in this past season. So I had a busy past season to get where I'm at. I've got 0 2024 picks, and I had a lone third in the 2023 before making moves. And so no big deal. But yeah, this is where I take liberties with the quality and go quantity at the wide receiver position.
Gotcha. Yeah, and that's how I kind of went for years, just getting a bunch of these like mid-tier guys, and going that way and just kind of filling in a roster. In terms of tight end, however, I have learned early days I never cared about a tight end, and I got sick of it and traded for Travis Kelce. And now I always want a dominant tight end. I want one of the top three guys. I usually run like 3 on my roster, but it's been Kelce for 3 years in a row now, or whatever it is, 3 or 4. And it's always Kelce with a younger vet behind him that I can throw in on the bye week, and then a rookie that I'm interested in. right now I only have two. Um, I thought I might be able to pick one up in the draft, and that didn't really end up
Ah,
happening.
mm,
So that kind of hurt. I was gonna go either Musgrave or like possibly Kincaid,
mm.
and kind of go that route. Ended up not. So I need to kind of replace that spot, but I think tight end can give you such an advantage, especially if you have a weaker wide receiver room or a weaker running back room. You can make up that difference with somebody like Travis Kelce or Gronk from back in the day, or George Kittle when he's going off, like people like that. Potentially, what Kyle Pitts is looking like, or like what we hope he becomes one day. So one of those guys can really change your roster, and then it's something you really don't have to worry about. Um, and so from that angle, I try really, really hard to get one of those top tier tight ends. At the time I traded you, there was a bunch of nonsense involved
Oh,
with the
yeah.
trade, but like essentially it was Alvin Kamara for Travis Kelce. So like that was the level that I was willing to spend to get a dominant tight end into my roster.
You got a Singletary in there too, man. You got to kick back on that.
That's
Um,
true.
yeah, man, this conversation is really spotlighted on how many trades we made. And
Hmm.
this is a lot of these trades were pre RDR, you know.
Yeah,
So, but
fair.
yeah, I like your stylings on the tight end. Having the number one tight end for years and years is definitely, like you're saying, like that's just an extra 6 to 10 points that other people can't
Just don't get.
expect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it gives you a huge bump. um I personally, I like to have like a 1-2 punch at the tight end position. I like to have two guys I trust in like a developmental third, but I typically always have three tight ends. I love tight ends. It's like I'm not going to throw the word guru around. We'll wait for AJ to guest join us to throw those words around. But I've had like amazing, I believe, amazing luck in getting tight ends like pre pop.
Mm.
Um, you know, I picked up Waller off the streets, straight up waiver wire pick before joining the Raiders and doing that. And it doesn't matter, but I've traded Waller, I traded Kelsey because I'm able to sell these higher end tight ends because I can backfill the position really well. So
Hmm.
that's where I'm sitting basically in all my leagues, just because I have my finger on the pulse in the tight end game. But currently rostering Dallas Goddard and Evan Ingram and Isaiah Likely. So I'm happy. I'm happy as can
Pretty
be.
good.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that position group at all. But yeah, I mean, that's basically gives you guys a little bit of background. So when we start to talk about how we build our bench, or like what we're looking for as far as like depth, as far as insurance and upside, you can have a little bit of a background and knowing like what we're up against. Because if you talk about your bench without knowing, what the basic roster construction looks like, then it's kind of arbitrary. But
Yeah.
now you guys know like why we're targeting certain players or whatever. But yeah, did you want to spend like a little bit of time maybe talking about some contrasting or just like different approaches to roster construction? And it could be we can make short mockeries of our colleagues in this league, or whatever you want to do.
I'm down. Let's run it.
Okay,
Live reacts.
boom. I guess I could start. I found my complement in the league. I've got like a short running back room and a deep wide receiver room, and like the
Mm.
talent is high end in running back, and then kind of spread out in the wide receiver room. And I'm looking at Danny's roster,
Mm.
Hap. And like I said, I have 6 running backs. This guy's walking out here with like, I don't even know, like 11 or 12. and then he only has 8 wide receivers, so it's complete contrast. And he has high end wide receivers, and it's looking strong for him. And then it's the running back room is like living on a prayer, man, just like my wide receiver room. And it just kind of makes me chuckle. And you can see his bench construction when you look at his quarterback room, like, Daniel Jones, Trey Lance, and Brock Purdy. It's like, oh
I
shit,
don't give a
he
fuck.
does not have a locked in starter that he doesn't have to, like, he might be making some shuffling moves there. So it's
Yeah.
just kind of funny to see a roster that contrast what I'm doing. But
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's especially interesting knowing Danny because he's such a running back truther for that to be like the weakness of his roster. Now he's got Bijan. So
mhm.
like how weak is it really?
No,
Uh
yeah, of course.
but and Roshan, to be honest, that's a sneaky little young pick right there. But it is funny, especially being the contrast to you, just because of that's not even how I would imagine Danny's roster to look with dominant wide receivers and then just subpar, not subpar, I guess, is strong. Because again, Bijan's being there, and then we just don't know about Cook, but just not as strong, which is interesting. In terms of, I don't know, I just want to talk about a roster I think is fairly constructed pretty well.
Yeah.
And that was it's Titan fan Clint's roster. He took over recently, and I just really like kind of he didn't change or like mess up the good things about that roster, but he kind of improved on it in certain areas. So like when he picked up the roster, it already had Lamb and Jamar Chase, so like no fuckery there. We're good. But then he goes ahead and drafts Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet. He trades for Keenan Allen and he drafts Jordan Addison. So like that's and then either trades for or drafts Rashad White as well. So now we've got a decent little running back room. The Charbonnet pick kind of got thrown off by the Seahawks double dipping there, but I still think that's really good. The only downside to his roster is that he's kind of ignored the tight end position.
Mm.
Where so he's rolling out Noah Fant. He took Schoonmaker, which is fun. Um, but like Hunter Henry, Foster Moreau, and Trey McBride are all kind of like big question marks. So then he went through and like traded a lot to get Patrick Mahomes on his roster when I think that was interesting. He could have maybe done a similar type trade for an elite tight end and
Sure.
then just kind of rolled out Tannehill until Kyler Murray was healthy. I get with the Kyler Murray situation, he may have been a little scared and that's why he made the move. But I think overall, I think he's got a really, really strong roster and he's going to compete. And I think it's well constructed.
Yeah, it's absolutely well constructed. I think all these rosters are very well constructed, Danny. Just like the contrast. No,
That's
he did
fair.
a bang up job recovering from what he was walking into.
Mhm.
Um, I'm gonna pick on Lance a little bit, not like
Okay.
not too bad, but just to look at his team. And we all know him as a guy who's always working on trying to make a trade happen to whatever level of success may come of it. But he has traded enough to get rookie picks that his roster is like 80% first and second year players.
Mhm.
And we didn't really talk about this too much in our approach to positions because it's impossible to. But in the dynasty realm, you want to have an amount of established players and potential players, and we'll get in that in the bench. But his roster, I'm not going to get into the specifics, but it is running real young, man. and
Mhm.
and it's like it stands out as a different type of approach when you're looking at all these rosters together. It's all I want to say is don't go too young if you can help it. Try to keep a
Hmm.
little age on your squad.
That's fair. You need a good mix of both, for sure, to kind of like make the dynasty aspect function. Because if you're too young, then you just kind of won't win enough, or be consistent enough to really keep yourself going. So it's fairly interesting to see all the different types of approaches. I don't want to spend too much more time because we still got
Sure,
benches to talk about, but I did want to
absolutely.
shout out one guy. That's Randy. Okay, Praxis on a different sort of buy-in. So he's very, very top heavy, but he has created a roster from like nothing, and now he has a dominant person at pretty much every position except tight end. Now, if he gets an injury, he's going to be hurting quite a bit, but he has built himself. So just to list his starting roster, he's got Jalen Hurts, Christian McCaffrey, Josh Jacobs, Justin Jefferson, Cooper Kupp, Gerald Everett, and then Drake London, and that's who he's running out. So that is a very, very strong roster, but he still is sold to do it, kind of sold a lot of the picks, sold a lot of what he had in depth, to get this roster this way, but that is very strong if he can make it through the injury bug. And it's a
Yeah,
like an impressive going for it this year roster.
yeah. If everything falls right, he's going to be in 100% amazing shape. So, man, I'm jealous. You get to looking at him, and there's a reason to be jealous of everyone's, and it's just because of different compilations, man.
Mm.
But you can't have it all, like we keep saying, like I keep saying. But when it comes to backing yourself up, I guess that's where the bench comes in. Most of your roster is not even getting wheeled out there for
Hmm.
irrelevant point scoring outings on Sundays. So there's a lot that goes into the construction of the roster. And so I don't really know if I'm going to talk about like a strategy so much as I'm just going to talk about like the type of players
Hmm.
that I've encountered, be it roster clogs or like gold mines or whatever you want to call them. But I have to start on a sad note. I've got to start on the. I almost came up with the Boys to Men song for every category,
Hell
but
yeah.
I'm just gonna go with the it's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday kind of guys.
Okay.
So I think we can all relate to this type. I'm bringing it in on a sad note. These are your Brian Edwards
Mm.
type of guys. I'm even putting like Paris Campbell
Yeah.
in there. TMJ
Hmm.
definitely going to be on this. And it really goes pretty deep. Um, so these are guys that like you got excited about that you probably drafted pretty high,
Hmm.
and you're still waiting to be right about them, and you can't let them go. So
Yeah.
so you have to account for an amount of roster space for these guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I held on to people arguably too long. That's part of my issue. Paris Campbell is a guy I held on to for 2 seasons, 3 seasons almost. I think maybe traded him at the end of the third. Noah Fant, similar deal. Right now, Jerry Judy is a guy that I can't get rid of, and drafted him at the 107 or 105 or whatever it was, 106 maybe. Um, Somewhere in there. And so like I'm with you, like those guys show up all the time. Now I will say right now, I've cleared my roster of those guys fairly well. You could argue Elijah Mitchell is there. But
Uh,
I would also argue that even when CMC's healthy, he gets a decent amount of carries and he's worth rostering anyway. So I
mhm.
wouldn't get rid of him either way. But he is a type of guy that I saw as a starter and was holding on to him for that. And then the CMC trade kind of fucked me up a little bit.
Yeah. See, for him and Jerry Judy, I'd probably go a different category.
Okay.
I call those guys that like flash in the pan.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I even got like Hunter Renfro and
Mm.
Johnny Smith in there. And like, so these guys have done it before, right? They've been
Hmm.
starters and then they disappear. And like, you don't want to, you don't want to drop them right
Yeah.
before they become relevant again. Cause it's in their, it's in their talent, their situation for them to produce again. So this is the composition I see when I look at these benches, man. Uh, but yeah, there are positives too. Maybe you got a positive category.
Yeah, I mean, so the way I build my running back depth essentially is to go after guys, like I said earlier at the top, like guys that I see injury risk for the people in front of them or just like weak kind of whatever. So I don't know what I would classify those guys as, maybe just like starter potential or like black or like black horse, I guess that's not dark horse starter potential. So like honestly, I throw like a guy like Elijah Mitchell into that potentially, like if CMC goes down. Pierre Strong is an interesting name and a guy that I'm holding on to in my roster. Just when he played last year, the one time they gave him decent reps, he produced. And the second guy to Ramondre is kind of wide open. Um, it was why I drafted a guy like Israel Abanikanda. Now with the Dalvin Cook rumors to the Jets, that looks less appealing. It's why,
That's not gonna happen.
yeah,
Come
probably
on.
not. But it's also why like a guy like Dwayne McBride, who definitely took some hits in terms of like draft stock of where we thought he would go. Definitely not on my side there, but like if the aforementioned Cook does end up going to the Jets or Miami or wherever the hell Dalvin Cook goes, is it crazy to think that Alexander Madison doesn't work out or gets hurt and Dwayne McBride comes in there and is able to be a two down back for the Minnesota Vikings? Like that's not crazy to me. So take a chance on a guy like that. Same reason I took a chance on Elijah Mitchell on the San Francisco 49ers background. Now that only backfield, it only worked for one season because of his injuries and then the trade with CMC, but had like that's the kind of guy you want to look for, like a sneaky starter. So my outside of my four starters that I talked about at the beginning, the four starting running backs I'd try to have, it's just filled with guys like that could potentially start if somebody gets hurt. Like just
Mhm.
backups who are like the number two, potentially number three that like have a vision to the starting lineup.
Yeah, I mean, high quality handcuffs, really. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the running back
But I
game.
don't I don't waste my own time. Like I don't waste time getting my own handcuffs though, typically. Because to
Yeah,
me, you're just clogging up a spot on your roster waiting for one of your own players to get hurt. Like, why would
right.
I not wait for one of your players to get hurt? And then I benefit from you getting hurt and either shipping me draft picks to replace the guy on your roster that just got hurt, or now I have a starter.
Absolutely, man. And I've never been a fan of handcuffs personally. Not like my own, definitely, and usually not other people's too. And I guess I have a little bit of notes on the subject, right? I have strong opinions about handcuffs. I don't really do it. I don't do handcuffs, and especially not my own handcuffs because no one is trading you your handcuff at a discount. Like
Yeah.
the people that have your handcuffs are in your ear trying to trick you into paying a premium for insurance, right?
Yeah.
Insurance is a ripoff. We all know this, you know? So for that reason, I kind of stay away. Um, and I mean, sure, you could have like the next Jamal Williams
Mm.
or Samaje Perine, but it's so much more often that you're just rostering, Zach Moss for how many ever years, and you bring up, Alexander Mattinson and the possibility of a Dalvin Cook trade or cut, depending on how that works out for the Vikings, and in order to get him now, it's probably going to cost you probably a high second, maybe,
Hmm.
right? And if you are like, like AJ in our league, you're a Vikings fan and you've had Mattinson on your roster for 4 years. And in that time, he's only had he's averaging about 3 double-digit fantasy games a year.
Mm,
So that's borderline roster clog for me.
yeah, 100%.
Now I'd say like in games that Dalvin's missed, he's averaging about 100 yards on the ground, so that's kind of nice. But I would much rather go like the way Clint went, right? He's got Walker and Charbonnet
Hmm.
because like that's not really a handcuff, right? That's a
That's
1A,
a
1B.
RBBC. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So you're ensuring that you get the production for that team without, without having to roster a player that doesn't have value.
Yeah.
So,
The difference being conceivably there could be weeks you could start Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet.
mhm.
That's never going to happen with Dalvin Cook. You're never going to start Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattinson. It's just not going to work. They eat each other's roles too much. And we could find out that Charbonnet and Walker eat each other too much as well. But
Sure.
with Charbonnet being like presumably the guy that's going to be there catching passes, they shouldn't do that too much. Um,
Absolutely. And we know that the way Seattle plays, like it could be that they're both, RB2s all year, no
yeah.
matter what's going on.
Hmm.
So yeah, so handcuffs is a big thing with the roster construction, and I can tell I see that we're not really buying into it.
Hmm.
Um yeah, so I guess I'll go into a different kind of guy. I've got so many of mine. Rosters are like benches are sad places, they're
Yeah.
like here the roster, the starting roster is like the bright lights in the front, and then you go back in the storeroom where the bench is, it's a little, the lights aren't all working and it's a little cluttered. So I was try to keep it positive, but I've got the sunken cost guys, man. Like the time suck, the guys that you just have to hold forever. Those guys are on your rosters. I've personally been through it with Calvin Ridley,
Hmm.
um, and now I'm going through it again with Rashad Bateman, right?
Gotcha.
Where it's like these can be injury prone guys, or just like you're waiting for a better coaching situation, or just the quarterback they need to really bloom. I mean, Terry McLaurin is not this guy because he's been successful, but like maybe DJ Moore has kind of
Hmm.
gone through moments like that. Allen Robinson. So these
Yeah.
are the kind of players that you really believe in, but they're not like starter ready. And the cost in which you acquired them is so high that you can't recoup that cost in any way. So you just got to hold them.
Hmm.
But I don't know, man.
Yeah, yeah. So basically just guys that like you still see as this value. So selling them at the value that they're currently at isn't an option for you, but they're still just taking up a spot on your roster,
Hmm.
essentially. Yeah. So like I don't have as many of those type of guys right now. But I've lived through similar phases. I had Odell on my roster
Sure.
like that for a while. I've had oh, I lost it. I had one a second ago, but I definitely have had guys like that you're talking about. I mean, my roster's kind of littered with wide receivers that are like meh towards that kind of attitude anyway, like Curtis Samuel, Chark, Jacoby Myers, KJ Osborne. But um
Sure.
yeah, so I'm with you. It's a fun little game you gotta play for sure.
Oh man. I mean, I don't know. I'll definitely let you take the lead for a second if you're into that.
Yeah, no, for sure. In terms of just like I didn't have so much guys
Hmm.
like labeled, but like looking at my bench, I'm more just like explaining why my team is developed the way it is. And so because I'm looking for those two superstars at the wide receiver room, and I've got two young guys in Garrett Wilson and Jerry Judy, still waiting on Jerry Judy's getting to be like that kind of flash in the pan guy. Well, he is kind of that flash in the pan guy that you talked about. Those are the guys I'm like banking on for this season. And I wanted to fill the rest of my roster with guys that I think are going to get like decent target volume that have consistently done it in the league. And so I
Okay.
mentioned it. I think that's the worst case for Deontay Johnson. I think best case is he gets like 120 catches and 1,100 yards and maybe like 5 or 6 touchdowns. I think that's like best case and really good. But worst case is he's just like a consistent guy. But that's the same. I'm trying to like alleviate the chance of one of these young guys not really popping or having a slump or getting hurt with guys that I can just throw in and get 14, 12 to 14 points. Curtis Samuel, DJ Chark with the Panthers is super interesting to me as a guy who has
Uh,
produced in the league, and now there's nobody on that team. Jacoby Myers, not so much, more of just a trade of circumstance. It's a body to have, but like he's a PPR consistent producer. I know people are just out on KJ Osborne all of a sudden. Jalen Rager is apparently more interesting than KJ Osborne, which is
uh,
mind-boggling to me. But like that's a guy I could see getting. So basically I'm filling these roles with like guys that maybe don't boom and like
mhm.
don't have awesome weeks, but they don't have like shitty weeks either. So I guess they're like my low floor or low ceiling decent floor type of guys. And that's kind of what I like to feel the rest of my roster out with in the wide receiver room. Running back room different. I'm looking for more guys that pop and like explode because all of a sudden they're their starter. But as for my bench as wide receiver, I just want guys that will produce, or like the occasional rookie that you're gonna wait on. That's like a later pick or whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, that's the perfect description of a bench, right? Because you got to have your rookie collection.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you really have to have the guys that are producing that aren't sexy. Like
Mm-hmm.
those guys are winning leagues, because they're possible starters
Mm-hmm.
every week. And then I mean a great bench will have, quality overflow, like guys that could be starters on another
Yeah,
roster. You're
obviously.
just like, yeah, yeah. If you're doing it right, you got that. So yeah, I mean, all of this is very much important. And then you got your diamond in the rough guys, like the guys that you have an insight on, that you're trading up for, or clearing heavy waiver hits for, to try and get ahead of, like, James Robinson, after the Lenny thing went down, like
Mm,
that was a nice diamond in the rough. Isaiah Pacheco last year was
really
huge.
good.
I was pretty proud of like moving into Isaiah Likely when I
Mm.
did, kind of ahead of the game. Not that it really accounted for much, and I've already bragged about my Darren Waller move. And then, we got a guy that got into Michael Wilson with the $14 fab bid,
Mm.
and like that. I'm jealous because I should have picked him up, and that was dumb that I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But like that's the kind of guys you want, like the guys that you're picking up on waivers or like trading up into the second or the early third to get, and like really just you have a feeling about those guys. Like that's what it's about for me in Dynasty,
Yeah.
like having great starters and winning is cool, but like being right about a player before other people are, like that's the juice, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Oh, for
So
sure. That's guys that I'm really into in the third round this year that I think they're weirdly all tight ends, but like Musgrave, Schoonmaker, those type of guys, and Jelani Woods last year are exactly that. Like trying to kind of double up on both of the roster construction spots we're talking about here, like me wanting one of those dominant tight ends, but carrying a young rookie, but like finding that guy in the third round. So I'm spending my valuable picks still on running back, still on wide receivers, but trying to find that valuable tight end in the third round when nobody else is paying attention. The fact that Schoonmaker was a perfect guy that I should, like you're saying, you missed on Michael Wilson. I should have picked up Luke Schoonmaker after the draft, rolling with 2 tight ends right now. That's 100% something I should have done, and I missed out on it. So those are the type of guys, like just kind of doubling into that spot because I just think you can get a lot of value there. Like Jelani Woods obviously didn't do a lot in his rookie season, but like pairing him with Anthony Richardson now is very interesting. And I still didn't spend a lot on him. So it's not like this crazy spot on my roster that's cost me a lot. So now I can still wait on a position that typically takes a long time to get going anyway.
Hell yeah. Yeah, and then sometimes it doesn't always pan out. Like this is why I still have Van Jefferson on my roster.
Yeah.
Like he 100% has the opportunities, like the number 2 wideout on Matthew Stafford's team and whatever. But so it goes both ways. But like these are guys you have to have. Um, another kind of, and I don't want to go forever, but I like to have some old but good players. Like people try to get out on older players before their values completely zapped. And I think it's great to have those guys, especially at the value. Your Tyler Lockett, your Adam Thielens, Brandon Cook type guys, even Jerick McKinnon and Cordero. I gotta throw a little hype at Kenyon Drake had 3 weeks last year as a top 10 running back.
Damn.
That blew me away. So
that's wild.
It's just like having those guys are winning you weeks, and winning you weeks are putting you in a position to get into the playoffs where you need to be to win the championship, man. And it's like we look at the big picture so much that you can't forget like these little building blocks can give you the edge.
Oh, 100%. And yeah, we probably ought to wrap it up here soon. I haven't been keeping track of the time, but for example, going into last season, you can buy so many of these vets for like a random second all the time. And sure, like, okay, you're paying a second, but like I traded Ezekiel Elliott to the guy that won our league last year right before he won the league, and Zeke had like 15 points in the playoffs every week for him. So like it happens. Like I got Cortland Sutton out of the deal, who is like fine or whatever, but he was able to take advantage of the fact that I didn't need this unusable vet, and now he has a championship. Sure, he has to cut Ezekiel Elliott now, and he's not going to get anything for him. But if that wins you a championship, exactly what you're talking about, these little cogs in the wheels to make sure you don't lose these extra games or don't lose specifically in the playoffs, those guys are invaluable. Like if you win a championship out of it, that second round pick, yeah, it might suck that you spend it on Zeke or whatever, or if you throw one towards any number of guys to go into the offseason, but you got to take your swings. I spent a first and a second on Cook and Wilson going into last year's playoffs, and it didn't really work for me. But I'd do it again, because like if that got me the championship, then those picks are irrelevant to me. So it's a risky dance you got to play for sure, but I think most of the time it's worth it.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Yeah, I just feel like I've got a million categories, and so I just have to cut it. I just have to stop. But I'll leave you with this thought, and you can have closing remarks as well if you care to. But I don't know if I think I'm more into upside than insurance when I build my bench. I really love taking dice rolls on guys who lose value, changing teams. You could end up with a James Conner going to Arizona, and Amari Cooper last year, probably his cheapest value ever. We've seen Gino do it. First year for Stafford was great. So those are kind of guys in the off season when you're like scratching your head, looking for proposals. Like I think it's worth it. But yeah, man, that, and then I have to ask you, I struggle so much when I make a waiver wire move. I struggle so much trying to decide who to cut. Do you go like the same position, like I'm trying to upgrade this position, or like low man on the roster, or like guys you're just cutting bait on? I so struggle with this.
It really depends. I mean, for the most part, I try to keep my roster pretty balanced. So like right now I have 8 running backs, 8 wide receivers. I try to keep it close-ish to that. Typically I have one less quarterback and one more tight end, but that would balance itself out right there. So then it would still be 8 and 8. That's what I like to try and do. So yeah, if I was picking up a new wide receiver, I would look at my lowest wide receiver and decide essentially, okay, is
Worth it.
that one for one value worth it? Now, if it's somebody that I really, really want and I just legitimately can't decide which receiver, like there's nobody I want to cut, then I will go dip into that running back room, or like in this case, I have 4 quarterbacks. I'd look into like balancing that back out, but it's rare that I would do that, to be honest. I like it to be very balanced. I never want to have like a lack or like a empty pool of players that I need. And that's a silly thought in a 16 bench league, but like that's just where I'm at. Yeah.
It's a disciplined approach, man. I might have to adopt it, even though my 50% wide receiver roster share should probably mean that I just cut a wide receiver every time, even though I still have Trey Sermon on my team. But
Yeah.
but all right, I'm done. I'm officially done talking.
Okay. Yeah. We probably should wrap it up. I need to start actually writing down like when we start so I can have a better idea. But on that note, we are going to get into some fresh, fun content coming next week. I believe. Actually, I'll let you take it because I think you have it's going to make me look like a terrible host, but I closed the page already. You've got it.
Okay. Well, yeah, I've got it here. Yeah, we're gonna get into like some prediction type stuff. A little bit of we really enjoy like this episode is fun, super casual, kind of off the top, but like what we really like doing is diving deep into situations and statistics and trying to predict and get ahead of the rest of our league. So we're gonna try and do like a top 3 running back handcuff
Mm-hmm.
episode. And depending on our time management, we might get into a top 3 with like a surprise RB or wide receiver 2s for 2023. So we're kind of just combing through and picking guys that we're excited about. And I really like talking about attainable players, like top 10. You're not going to be able to get those guys from other people, but these are the players that like really you can spend your off season wearing guys down and trying to make moves for. So we're going to dive into that and see how it goes. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Yeah, I'm really, really excited. Predictions are fun. They're a lot more intense. We got to put ourselves on the line, and we're ready to do that for you guys. But
Absolutely.
until then, we've been Rough Draft Research, and you've been the audience. And we will see you guys next week.
Heck yeah, man. You guys been a great audience.
All right.